All right. Well, welcome back to the plagiarism controversy. This is round 4. And in a quick review, I'll show you where you can find the documents. I'll show you on my, let's do this, make me small. Okay. So what you can do is you can go into Real Science Radio. This is rsr.org. rsr.org. You can search executive summary, and then you can get this page. Again, rsr.org. It stands for Real Science Radio, and you're going to get this, the top one, Kevin Lee, Austin Brown, Mediation Executive Summary. So click on that, skip through the additions and the letter from Pastor Lee, go down to Appendix 1, and you can see how this began, how Walt Brown tried to do this privately. And we read 3 or 4 letters, and then also the setting the record straight. That was round 1. Round 2 would be you would go into hydroplate.org, and let's see, hydroplate.org, and go into hydroplate resources and go down to the hydroplate controversy, and then hit this button up here, hydroplate documents. And then you're going to see, and what did we do? We think we did this one. We did one of them. Austin. We did some of those, and now we just in round 3 was the Brown letter to Coppage. And now we're going to do this mediation one. Okay, so do you see that? Yeah, you should see that. Okay. Creation controversy. So let's go down. Yeah, this should be all of them. Yep, there we go. Okay, creation controversy. Scanned images for September 21st, 1994 letter from Pastor Robinson to Brown and Austin outlining mediation panel rulings. So they had their mediation. They signed up for binding arbitration and backed out 4 days before that. And Walt Brown reluctantly agreed to mediation. Okay, this is September. Okay, dated September 21st, 1994. So think of this. This is 31 years ago. This is what was supposed to happen 31 years ago. Okay, it's to Dr. Walt Brown and Steve Austin. Dear gentlemen, this letter is to seek to resolve the issue submitted to me arising out of mediation on June 21st, 1994. We met together on that day to discuss serious allegations and concerns and to seek God's will and glory for this situation. We benefited from the wise counsel of retired Los Angeles Supreme Court Judge Jack Cricket, an experienced, patient, and intellectual property attorney Gregory Wood. After much discussion, the two of you agreed to resolve your differences by rewording footnote 40 of one of Steve Austin's publications to issue a joint statement to not more than 50 individuals affected by this dispute, and to cease derogatory statements and personal attacks involving each other. It was agreed that with regard to the editing of the footnote and the joint statement, I would be responsible to resolve any controversy between the two of you regarding the exact wording and the implementation of these measures. Okay, more than 50 individuals affected by this dispute. To not more than, okay, footnote, to issue a joint statement to not more than 50 individuals affected by this dispute. First of all, I want to express my appreciation for the organized, thorough, and comprehensive submission of material submitted to my office over the last month. The time, energy, and effort reflected in those materials reinforced to me the importance of this dispute to each of you and the passion you have about it. I apologize that the other demands of my work prevented me from responding to you sooner. I just completed a trip to Atlanta, which provided the opportunity for long periods of uninterrupted time for concentration, during which I carefully examined every document submitted. After reviewing such information, I am compelled to respond to 3 issues at this time. The first issue involves the wording of footnote number 40. I have attached a separate sheet containing my determination of how the footnote should read. I know that both of you will be disappointed by parts of it, and thus will explain my thought process here. My understanding is that the objective in rewriting footnote 40 was to provide greater recognition for Dr. Brown's contribution in this area. Much of Mr. Brown's suggested draft addressed issues far beyond that scope and included matters about which Dr. Austin disagrees. Since it is Dr. Austin's book, I decided Dr. Austin's writing style, choice of words, and understanding of historic reality should prevail, except for the paragraph that describes Dr. Brown. I drew heavily from Dr. Brown's proposal describing Dr. Brown's contribution, seeking to edit so as to minimize the repagation concerns of concerns of Dr. Austin. I was influenced by Dr. Austin's paganation concerns. What is this word? Paganation. What is paganation? We're all going to learn something right now. Paganation. Pagination. Paganation. What is paganation? Okay, the process is the process of dividing a document into discrete pages, either electronic or printed. Okay, history and rules and algorithms. Okay, so it's how they put it all together. Okay, that's a pretty big word. Okay, I was influenced by Dr. Austin's paganation concerns, but also equally influenced by Dr. Brown's variety of suggestions for addressing those concerns while still providing sufficient room to accomplish the objective of the agreement. The second item submitted for resolution is the joint statement to be circulated to no more than 50 individuals. Upon carefully reviewing the material, I have not seen a suggested draft from either of you. I understand that Dr. Brown feels that this joint statement should be issued after the resolution of the footnote 40 issue. Again, I sincerely apologize that my schedule precluded me from closely examining these materials sooner because of the ongoing damage that is done until this matter is fully and finally resolved. It is my intention to resolve this question of the joint statement as quickly as possible. I have enclosed a first draft of such a joint statement for both of you to review and revise. I am fixing a copy of this letter and both attachments to both of you today with a hard copy to followed by regular mail. I believe it is preferable for the joint statement to come from you as far as accomplishing the goal of unifying the Christian creationist community and demonstrating the lordship of Christ in this matter. Therefore, I am requesting that the two of you discuss my draft and seek to formulate a mutually acceptable draft. In the event that you cannot do so within 14 days of the date of this letter, October 5th, you will then be given an additional 7 days until October 12th to submit your proposal and arguments to me regarding modification to my draft. I will carefully review your proposals and concerns and create a joint statement within the next 7 days, October 19th. I will sign the draft with my title as mediator / arbitrator on behalf of the Center for Conflict Resolution, a Christian Conciliation Service Ministry, and also list my titles as Associate Director of the Institute for Dispute Resolution and Assistant Professor of Law at Pepperdine University School of Law. Dr. Brown should generate the 50 labels of the individuals to receive this statement and deliver those labels to my office for distribution of the statement by October 19th. The third issue for resolution regards the name attributed to the lake in question. Dr. Brown provided the name Grand Lake. Dr. Austin utilized the same name for the period of 1988 to 1994, at which time he published the revised version of his Grand Canyon guidebook, in which he used the new name Canyonlands Lake. My impression from our discussions at the June 21st meeting was that the controversy and allegations from Dr. Brown was one of the significant factors in Dr. Austin's decisions to begin referring to his lake as Canyonlands Lake. The thought being that if using the same name as Dr. Brown attributes to Dr. Brown's allegations of plagiarism by Dr. Austin, then Dr. Austin would cease utilizing the same name. My resolution of this issue will seek to implement my understanding that the agreement at the conclusion of the June 21st meeting was in essence that the cause of creationism and the lordship of Christ would be best advocated by Dr. Brown ceasing his allegation of copyright infringement and plagiarism by Dr. Austin, and that Dr. Austin would more recognize Dr. Brown's contributions, among other significant contributors to the Grand Lake theory. While we all recognize that Dr. Austin and Dr. Brown continue to have significant scientific differences, there was an agreement that there would be a more collegial and professional personal relationship because of their mutual Christian commitment, and the Christian value of forgiveness and reconciliation for whatever wrongs that each may feel. Okay. Yeah, how would that start? My resolution of this issue will seek to implement my understanding that the agreements. Okay. My determination will seek to recreate the status of their relationship as if the acrimony had not arisen, and seek to implement the spirit of reconciliation represented by the agreement on June 21st. Accordingly, I believe that Dr. Austin would have continued using the title Grand Lake had the controversy never arisen. He should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Dr. Brown, and also as one way to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contribution regarding this body of water. The scope of this determination extends to footnote 62 and the main text of his Grand Canyon guidebook. This utilization of the name created by Dr. Brown and recognition of Dr. Brown's contribution in this area does not extend to agreeing with any or all of Dr. Brown's theories regarding how the lake was formed or drained. Okay, let's go back to this. Dr. Austin should now, I guess you can't do that. I was going to highlight it. Should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of commitment to reconcile. So Steve Austin should use Grand Lake. I know that there are portions of this determination that will be disappointing to each of you. The objective in my deliberations was to recapture and implement the gestures made by each of you that enabled the June 21st meeting to end in an agreement symbolizing reconciliation rather than arbitration decision with a winner and a loser. Dr. Brown's final submission to me repeated many of the allegations giving rise to the conflict. I refuse, and I pray that each of you will also refuse to open those old wounds. Rather, I ask you to join me in embracing the spirit that enabled you to end the June 21st meeting with a handshake and a commitment to seek to show God's grace, love, and forgiveness more in your relationship with each other. I pray that it is in that spirit that you will accept and implement the above determinations. Rest assured that I and many others will be praying for God's continued blessing on both of you and the important work you are conducting. Sincerely, Peter Robinson, Mediator, Arbitrator, Center for Conflict Resolution, Associate Director and Assistant Professor of Law, Institute for Dispute Resolution, Pepperdine University School of Law. CC'd Catherine Blankenship, Honorable Jack Crick, Greg Wood, Esquire. Okay, dear blank. This letter is to inform you the resolution of the controversy involving Dr. Walt T. Brown and Dr. Stephen A. Austin. You were selected. Okay, this is the draft that he had that they were supposed to agree on, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so there's supposed to be 50 of these sent out, if I understand right. Okay, dear blank, this letter is to inform you about the resolution of the controversy involving Dr. Walt T. Brown and Stephen A. Austin, or Dr. Stephen A. Austin. You were selected to receive this letter as one of the people who was probably aware that a controversy had existed and one who would be interested in knowing the resolution. The controversy surrounds the theory that the Grand Canyon was formed by the drainage from a very large lake that existed many years ago east of the Grand Canyon. Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin agree that this body of water, in addition to Hopi Lake, existed, but disagree about how it may have been formed. Each of them contributed toward advancing this theory. Specifically, Dr. Brown applies a hydroplate theory to explain a rise in the Kaibab Plateau, as well as a number of other geological phenomena that he identified in western United States. In 1988, he conducted an extensive field work to explore the existence of this second body of water and its approximate location, which he named Grand Lake. Dr. Brown acknowledges the work of other scientists in advancing the existence of the lake, including Dr. Edward W. Holroyd III and Dr. Bernard E. Northrup, but he believes he significantly advanced this theory with his work and contribution. The controversy arose when Dr. Austin published his 1989 Grand Canyon Field Guide and made reference to this lake by the name Grand Lake and attributed at the same elevation and location as Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown believed that Dr. Austin had utilized information generated or proposed by Dr. Brown without attribution. Dr. Austin explained that such was not the case, but that he generated his conclusion based on the work of Dr. Holroyd and others. Dr. Brown's and Dr. Austin's lectures and other activities among the creationist community resulted in a controversy involving 3 issues. First, a difference of agreement regarding the correctness of Dr. Brown's hydroplate theories. Second, the specifics and significance of Dr. Brown's contributions to the advance of the Grand Lake theory. And finally, the issue of whether Dr. Austin utilized any of Dr. Brown's contributions without attribution. Dr. Brown, Dr. Austin, and Dr. William Morris attended a meeting convened by the Center for Conflict Resolution, a Christian conciliation service ministry in Orange County on June 21st, and presided over by the Honorable Jack Cricket, a retired Los Angeles Supreme Court judge, Gregory Wood, a prominent intellectual property attorney, and Peter Robinson, the associate director for the Institute for Dispute Resolution and assistant professor at Pepperdine University School of Law. The objective of the meeting was to resolve these matters in a manner that would reflect the Christian devotion of both men and permit them to labor side by side in the advancement of the creation movement. An intense discussion was held for more than 4 hours and concluded with many questions unanswered and many issues unresolved between the parties. Even so, Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin agreed that the matter should be concluded on the following terms. Dr. Brown would stop advancing his allegation that Dr. Austin had utilized material generated by Dr. Brown without attribution. Number 2, Dr. Austin would rewrite portions of his Grand Canyon guidebook to reflect a greater appreciation for Dr. Brown's contribution in this manner. 3, Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin would distribute this joint statement to the 50 leaders of the creation movement that were aware of and may have been affected by knowledge of this controversy, and to any other individual that would raise this matter with either Dr. Brown or Dr. Austin. 4, that Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin would personally cease to discuss the controversy arising over the specifics and significance of the Dr. Brown's contributions toward the Grand Lake theory and allegations of Dr. Austin's using Dr. Brown's material without attribution. 5, that Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin will maintain their professional disagreement regarding the hydroplate theory and explanation of various phenomena, but will promote a collegial and professional interpersonal relationship. Both Dr. Austin and Dr. Brown respectfully request your prayer and support in their commitment to seek to implement this agreement. Your acceptance of this statement without additional investigation or discussion will be one of the ways that you can be of assistance. Sincerely, Steve Austin, Dr. Walt Brown. Okay. Dr. Robinson's determination regarding footnote 40. Attachment A. The concept of rapid breaching of the Kaibab upwarp by drainage from lakes has a long history. The concept was expressed by J.S. Newberry in 1861. Okay. And hence followed in the work of Elliot Blackwelder in 1934. Geological evidence of large lake in northeastern Arizona, Hopi Lake, was provided by Howell Williams in 1936. Tectonic activity is thought to have interrupted the flow of the Colorado River, creating a large lake behind the Kaibab Plateau, followed by piping failure. G.C. Bowles in 1978. Creationists were suggesting catastrophic drainage models in the 1960s and 70s. One of the most noteworthy early creation statements of the breach dam theory appeared in the writings of Clifford Burdick, The Canyon of Canyons, in 1974. Bernard E. Northrup proposed in 1968 that erosion of the Grand Canyon was caused by release of trapped glacial melt waters in the post-flood period, centuries after Noah's flood. Post-flood ponding of water east of Grand Canyon behind a tectonic upwarp was suggested as the cause to cutting the canyon by Steve Austin and John H. Whitmore in 1986. Edmund W. Holroyd III recognized that a lake bigger than one of the Great Lakes could be contained upstream of Grand Canyon if the canyon was blocked approximately at the 5,800 at the 5,600-foot elevation. Missing talus, Creation Research Quarterly, 1987. The breach dam theory was described in 1988 in a field guidebook, Steve Austin. Institute for Creation Research. Okay, and what do they do here? That got crossed out. Oh, how did it get crossed out? The theory conducting the breaching dams, the location by Walt Brown. Okay, and add it, cross that out and add it. In 1989, Walter T. Brown Jr., in proposing the hydroplate theory, also proposed where a very large lake at an elevation of 5,700 feet once occupied much of southeastern Utah and parts of Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. In the beginning, 1989, 5th edition. Brown named it Grand Lake and suggested that its breach between what is now Vermilion Cliffs and Echo Cliffs, together with the breach of Hopi Lake, formed the Grand Canyon. Interesting field evidence for a catastrophic drainage of lakes and dialogue concerning the history of discussions is found in Edmund W. Holroyd III, Missing Talus, in 1990. A summary of some of these theories was published by E.L. Williams, J.R. Meyer, and G.W. Wolfram, Erosion of the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River, and that was in 1992, Creation Research Quarterly. Further comments were provided by Michael Ord, comments on breach dam theory for the formation of Grand Canyon, Research Quarterly, 1993. Okay, so that's what I think he wanted the footnotes to be. Okay. Complete letter. I think we did that one. Oh, are these going backwards again? Hope not. Okay, so let's check this one out. We must have done this. Yeah, I think we read this one. Okay, that's good. How about this one? Letter from Peter Robertson to Brown and Austin outlining mediation. No, we did not read this one. What's the date on this one? September 21st. Portions of the letter from Peter Robinson, head of mediation board, to Walt Brown and Steve Austin, telling Austin to use the name Grand Lake because that is the name given to it by its discoverer, Walt Brown. Letter was dated September 21st. Okay, I think we read this. Yeah, we did read this. Dr. Brown provides the name Grand Lake. Dr. Austin utilized the same name for the period of 1988 to 1994, at which time he published and revised the revised version of his Grand Lake Grand Canyon guidebook, in which he used the new name of Canyonlands Lake. My impression from our discussion at the June 21st meeting was that the controversy and allegations from Dr. Brown was one of the significant factors in Dr. Austin's decision to begin referring to this lake as Canyonlands Lake. The thought being that if using the same name as Dr. Brown contributed to Dr. Brown's allegation of plagiarism. Okay. I believe that Dr. Austin would have continued using the title Grand Lake had the controversy never arisen. He should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Dr. Brown, and also as one way to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contribution regarding this body of water. The scope of this determination extends to footnote 62 in the main text of Grand Canyon's guidebook. Okay, that's what should have happened 31 years ago. And what do they call that lake now? Canyonlands Lake. Okay, so let's back up a little bit and see what else is happening here. Robinson to Brown and Austin, page 2. I think we might have done this already. Yeah, I think we've done this. Okay, Robinson to Brown. Yeah, we did this already. Okay, so you guys are learning as well as I am. Yeah, that's how it should have been. We got that. Yep. So I'm not sure why that's there. Okay, we'll go back again. And Austin to Robinson. Okay. Institute of Creation Research, October 4th, 1994. Okay, let's see what's happening here. This is from Henry Morris, PhD, the way it looks. I thought it said Austin, though. Let's see who signs off on this one. Oh, this one looks like fun. Okay, who's going to sign off on it? Well, we'll see once. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, let's go up to the top. Let's see if we can figure it out at the very top. Okay, it's from ICR, and it's October 4th, 1994. This says Henry Morris, president. Dwayne Gish, no, that's not it. Okay. Dear Peter. Okay, October 4th, 1984. This must be Austin because that's what it says. Austin to Robinson. So this is from Steve Austin. To Professor Peter Robinson. Dear Peter, this letter concerns the Brown-Austin mediation agreement, which was established on June 21st. Specifically, this letter concerns three matters. Endnote number 40 and the content of the errata sheet, the name of the lake, and the joint statement to be issued by Brown and Austin. Endnote 40. My understanding of your September 21st letter is that your letter settled the content of Endnote 40. I will abide by that determination and will make the change in the second printing of the book. Because the revision you suggest adds 4 extra lines to the endnote, I will delete some or all of the second sentence of the endnote to avoid repagination of the book. ICR intends to insert an errata sheet into remaining copies in our warehouse. The errata sheet will state that the original sentence concerning Walt Brown should be revised to read as you determined. Please state that this is your intention for us to do this because your September 21st letter does not mention an errata sheet. We will confirm that the errata sheet is inserted if you direct us to insert it. I assume there is no need for me to respond to Walt Brown's objection to the revisited endnote of number 40 as he expressed in his December 28 letter. The content of endnote, I assume, has already been settled. If Brown wants to continue the dispute on endnote 40, it will delay the errata sheet. Page 2. It says to Professor Robinson, the name of the lake. The second to the last paragraph of your September 21st letter says that Dr. Austin should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Dr. Brown, and that this determination extends to footnote 62 and the main text of his Grand Canyon guidebook. My understanding of the second to last paragraph is that this is your recommendation, not your determination. You use the word should now continue using the title Grand Lake. Let remind you that the mediation agreement concerns only endnote number 40 on page 109. There is no agreement to revise endnotes number 62 or the text of the book. I heard no mention of endnote number 62 at the June 21st meeting. I heard no objections to the texts. It seems like we are going back to the mediation table. I thought the matters to be performed were already decided. To change the terminology of the book of Canyonlands Lake to Grand Lake would require 8 changes. And those are the pages, and those are what has to be changed. The business office advises me that this would be very expensive and recommends that these changes not be made. I find significant academic reasons for not wanting to change from Canyonlands to Grand. First, there is the need to have informal terminology, which does not lead to confusion. Brown's Grand Lake, as he has defined it, has different location and elevation than my proposed Canyonlands Lake. There is also the problem of the duplicate use of Grand Lake. I mentioned all these matters in the attachment of my August 29 letter. I believe that the informal terminology we use today should be adapted to later elevation to formal terminology. I believe that the informal terminology we use today should be adapted to later elevation to formal terminology. In this respect, I find Grand Lake objectionable. The shoreline of ancient lakes occasionally are displayed on published maps, and because of this, used terminology should conform to national naming standards. My goal is to get it right the first time rather than have to change terminology later because of geographic naming codes require. Page 3. Attachment A is a Principles, Policies, and Procedures Domestic Geographic Names published in 1989 by the U.S. Board of Geographic Names of the U.S. Geological Survey. Policy 8, page 18, concerns duplicate names. Names proposed for unnamed geographic features that duplicate another name in the state or nearby in adjoining states will not normally be approved by the U.S. Board of Geographic Names. Thus, if we made an application with the U.S. Board of Geographic Names for formal status of the name Grand Lake in Colorado, our name would be disqualified because there is already a Grand Lake in the upper Colorado River drainage basin. If we made application for the formal status of the name Canyonlands Lake, we would have no name duplication. See National Geographic Names database. I recommend that we continue using the name Canyonlands Lake, assuming that it will someday be elevated to formal status. Let's get it right the first time. I'm for careful use of terminology. I have reviewed the policy on duplicate names concurrently in use by the United States Geological Survey. That policy was approved by the Secretary of the Interior April 20, 1981. Because our terms were introduced after 1981, I suggest we conform to the appropriate naming policy. Owens Lake in Central California is formally recognized by the federal government. Maps even show its shoreline. However, Owens Lake is a non-existent lake, having been drained many years ago by the city of Los Angeles. In the spirit of academic freedom, I find it unconvincing to require Grand Lake as a symbol of commitment when much more substantial naming policy exists. The joint statement. Attachment B is my recommended joint statement. Thank you for your model statement. I greatly helped my revision. I took 2 paragraphs from the Robinson version, September 21st, 1994, and attempted to preserve the style and tone, making a single shorter paragraph. My position is surmised in the single sentence. Dr. Austin believes that Dr. Brown's summer 1988 field research on erosion of Grand Canyon was impacted by Brown's reading of Austin's April 1988 publication. Brown gets equal space for his summary. Dr. Brown believes that Dr. Austin utilized information from Brown's 1988 radio interview and Brown's 1989 publication without proper attribution. Then follows our 4, not 3, points of dispute. You will notice that I have added the 4th point, whether Dr. Brown utilized any of Dr. Austin's contributions without attribution. Page 4. As evidence that this 4th issue is real, I have included attachment C, a copy of the letter from Dr. D. Russell Humphreys to Dr. Walt Brown, dated October 5th, 1993. You will note on page 2 of this letter that Humphreys suggests that Brown may have an obligation of attribution to Austin. I bring this up to illustrate that the 4th issue involved other people, and that it is therefore an issue to be included in the joint statement. You will also remember that EndNote 40 originally read later after reading Austin's 1988 field guidebook. Dr. Walt Brown offered specific details to the theory. I maintain there is no error in this statement, only a suggestion that Brown found offensive. For the purpose of mediation, I will accept your revision, but do not ignore the issue it brings up. Because I do not want to adapt the name Grand Lake in the book, the revision to the book only concerns EndNote number 40. Thus, my revised joint statement reads, Dr. Austin would rewrite an EndNote of his Grand Canyon guidebook to reflect a greater appreciation for Dr. Brown's contribution in this matter. Attachment D is my 1989 Grand Canyon guidebook, distributed in February of 1989. You will note that the lake map, which I published before Dr. Brown published his lake map of August 1989, attachment E is my 1988 Grand Canyon guidebook, distributed March of 1988. Walt Brown has acknowledged reading my 1988 guidebook in April of 1988, just 1 month after he started work on the erosion of Grand Canyon. Later in the summer of 1988, he made his field observations. Would attribution be appropriate? Excuse me. Let me comment briefly on Dr. Brown's September 28 version of the joint statement. I believe that Brown's joint statement contains many trivial details which are not needed in this statement. Why do we need a complete abstract of Brown's erosion model? It seems that any allegation that Brown offered at the mediation table, June 21st, is appropriate for the joint statement, even matters which we were told would be confidential. He even writes of mediation matters as if they were settled. There was no settlement. I'm aware of some problems of Brown's joint statement. On the bottom of Brown's September 28th attachment, E, page 1, we find the statement, did Dr. Austin use any of Dr. Brown's contributions without attribution? Dr. Austin admitted that he got the name Grand Lake from Dr. Brown. However, he denied getting the other details from Dr. Brown. Dr. Austin said his conclusions were based on the work of Dr. Holroy and others. Dr. Austin has now acknowledged these contributions in a 1994 book. Page 5. This statement implies that Dr. Brown did not receive attribution in any of Dr. Austin's writings before 1994. Evidently, Brown is not familiar with the 1993 Grand Canyon Guidebook, Attachment F, which says the name Grand Lake was suggested by Walt Brown. Page 106. This statement was described by Austin in March of 1993 before Brown's letter of June 18, 1993, first complaining to Dr. Austin about lack of attribution. I am offended by the statement. Dr. Morris also regretted inaccurate comments he published about Dr. Brown in 1984. Brown's joint statement, page 2. I did not hear any regret from Dr. Morris, and when he read the statement, he objected. I will be leaving on October 15 for 2 weeks, so I request that all of this proceeding be completed by October 14th, not October 19th, 1994. If a final determination on the name of the lake and the contents of EndNote 40 can be made as soon as possible, we will immediately prepare the errata sheets and order corrections for a new printing. Okay, so then he's got a bunch of Appendix B recommendations, Humphreys. Okay, this is the principles and policies, geographic names. This is how he wants the joint statement to read. Dear blank, this letter is to inform you about the resolution of the controversy involving Dr. Walter T. Brown and Stephen A. Austin. You were selected to receive this letter as one of the people who was probably aware of the controversy and had existed and one who would be interested in knowing of the resolution. The controversy developed after both Dr. Austin and Dr. Brown published descriptions in 1989 of how Grand Canyon could have formed by breaching of a dam. Publications of Dr. Austin's February of 1989 and Dr. Brown's August of 1989 include lake maps. The similarities between these explanations initiated a controversy concerning who should be credited with the origin of the idea, whose nomenclature should be used, and whose contributions should be received attribution. Dr. Austin believes that Dr. Brown's summer 1988 field research on the erosion of Grand Canyon was impacted by Brown's reading of Austin's April 1988 publication. Dr. Brown believes that Dr. Austin utilized information from Brown's September 1988 radio interview and Brown's 1989 publication without proper attribution. Lectures and other activities by both scientists resulted in a controversy involving 4 issues. First, a difference regarding the correctness of Dr. Brown's hydroplate theories. Second, the specifics and significance of Dr. Brown's contributions to advance the Grand Lake theory. Third, the issue of whether Dr. Austin utilized any of Dr. Brown's contributions without attribution. And finally, the issue of whether Dr. Brown utilized any of Dr. Austin's contributions without attribution. Dr. Brown, Dr. Austin, and Dr. Henry Morris attended a meeting convened by the Christian for Conflict Resolution, a Christian Consolation Service Ministry in Orange County in June 21st, presided over by the Honorable Jack Cricket, a retired Los Angeles Supreme Court judge, Gregory Wood, a prominent intellectual property attorney, and Peter Robinson, the associate director of the Institute for Dispute Resolution and associate professor at Pepperdine University. The objective of the meeting was to resolve these matters in a manner that would reflect the Christian devotion of both men and permit them to labor side by side in the advancement of the creation movement. An intense discussion was held for more than 4 hours and concluded with many questions unanswered and many issues unresolved between the parties. Even so, Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin agreed that the matter should be concluded on the following terms. Dr. Brown would stop advancing his allegations that Dr. Austin had utilized material generated by Dr. Brown without attribution. Dr. Austin would rewrite an endnote of his Grand Canyon guidebook to reflect a greater appreciation of Dr. Brown's contributions in the matter. 3, that Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin would distribute this joint statement to the 50 leaders of the creationist movement that were aware of and may have been affected by the knowledge of this controversy, and to any other individual that would raise this matter with either Dr. Brown or Dr. Austin. 4, that Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin would personally cease to discuss the controversy arising over the specifications and significance of Dr. Brown's contributions toward the Grand Lake theory and allegations of Dr. Austin's using Dr. Brown's material without attribution. And 5, Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin would maintain their professional disagreement regarding the hydroplate theory and explanations for various phenomena, but will promote a collegial and professional interpersonal relationship. Both Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin respectively request your prayers and support in their commitment to implement this agreement. Your acceptance of this statement without additional investigation or discussion will be one of the ways you can be of assistance. Okay, this is Humphrey's letter to Brown, October 5th, 1993. Okay, and this is signed by Russ Humphreys. And CC to Steve Austin, Robert Gentry, and Henry Morris. Okay, this is October 5th, 1993. Dear Walt, I received the copy you sent me of your August 19th, 93 letter to Steve Austin, along with a copy of your July 6th, 93 manuscript, Grand Lake and the Breach Dam Theories, setting the record straight. There are several things concerning me in the two documents that I think you have misunderstood. I have never heard Steve Austin accuse you of plagiarism. I have never heard anyone else say that he did so. In fact, I cannot recall him ever mentioning you before this July. Until then, you have never played a significant part in any of our discussions. Number 2, I never said that you were taking credit for Austin's ideas. What I told Bob Gentry in his phone call to me last June was that you should acknowledge Steve's work. I thought it likely that you had thought of the dam break idea independently of and later than Steve, and that when you later heard of his work, you were simply too egotistic to acknowledge him as a fellow worker in the field. This is quite distinct from the idea of you deliberately taking credit from Steve, an idea I never suggested to Bob or had in my mind. Bob can testify I never used the word plagiarism in the phone call, and he says he told you so. 3, I never confirmed the above to you. Here are my notes on your June 28 call. Brown finally got in touch, 11 a.m., asked me about accusations of plagiarism. I said I had asked Gentry if Brown had acknowledged Steve Austin's work. Gentry had said no. I said he should do so. And notes. As I hope you can see, this is not the same as saying that you were taking credit from Steve. 4, your non-acknowledgement was not the reason I declined Gentry's videotape offer. Bob assumed that was the reason, but he was wrong. I was quite emphatic in your June 30th phone call to me that the reason was your constant running away from peer review, and that I did not want to be associated with that kind of creationism. Here are my complete notes on that conversation. June 30th, Brown called me again, 3 p.m., wanted more details. Then he asked if I'd refused to go on Gentry's videotape because Brown was on it. I said yes, and explained why. Brown consistently avoided public peer reviews, thus does a disservice by peddling his views to an undiscriminating lay public. I spoke very strongly, but did not stoop to insult. Nonetheless, I think I heard the last from Brown. He did not want to accept this view of himself and abruptly terminated the conversation. You stated on page 12 of your July 6th manuscript concerning Bob Gentry's phone call to me that Humphrey's recent charges, which I personally verified, were not vague. What charges? I made strong recommendations that you should acknowledge Steve, but it was your mind which amplified that into charges. It was that interpretation of your mind which you personally verified, not any words or intent of mine. Neither Gentry or myself supplied the word plagiarism. That too was the invention of your mind. Your garbled reporting of my own words makes me wonder how accurate the rest of your account is. I hope in the interest of truth, you will at least correct your account of my 3 phone conversations. Page 2, where's the beef? I don't understand what your beef is with Steve. On page 5 of the manuscript, you say that you began thinking of a breach dam hypothesis in March of 1988. But at the bottom of the same page, you admit that in April of 1988, you were reading Steve's description of a breach dam hypothesis in the 1988 guidebook, which you know had to be written more than a month previously. So by your own account, Steve had the breach dam idea before you did. You say on page 6 in the 1989 guidebook, Steve did not appropriately credit Ed Holroyd for the map of Grand Lake. That would depend on what Steve and Ed communicated to one another previous to that time. But on the top of page 5, you say that you knew nothing of Holroyd's work until this summer, and apparently you contributed nothing to Holroyd's before that time. So the matter of the map is entirely between Steve and Ed Holroyd, and it does not concern you at all. In your August 19 letter, you insist that Steve admit making false accusations and committing plagiarism. As to plagiarism, you've already admitted that Steve had the essential idea before you, and you cannot be the offended party. So why are you butting in? If Ed Holroyd feels offended, then let him come forward and speak for himself. As for false allegations, I've already explained that Steve has never accused you of plagiarism in my hearing, and that whatever you make of what I said it independently of Steve. That removes half of your supposed evidence and leaves only what you allege. Page 1 of your manuscript, that the Brooks said Steve said that you had taken some of his material on the Grand Canyon. Since you admit that Steve had the idea before you, and since you had not been acknowledging him so in your talks, it seems to me that if Steve said it, he would have had some justification in saying so. Thus, if he made such a statement, it would not have been deliberately false. Therefore, I conclude that you personally have no real case against Steve. The way of Robert Hooke. As I mentioned to you on June 30th, you wouldn't have encountered this trouble if you had simply acknowledged in your talk that Steve had also done some work on the same idea. Since 1983, thousands of people have heard Steve mention the dam break idea in his talks. And when they hear you laying down claim the same idea years later, they are naturally more suspicious of you than him. This would cause justifiable grassroots murmuring, which is probably the only thing behind the vague accusation of plagiarism you say you have been receiving the last few years. Thus, I think that you yourself are the cause of the rumors damaging your ministry. Your behavior in this affair reminds me of Robert Hooke, a 17th century scientist who spent a great deal of time and energy attacking Isaac Newton. Hooke claimed that he thought of gravitation first, and he delayed the publication of Newton's Principia for some time. Hooke was intelligent and creative, but because of his choleric attacks on other scientists, he never had time to follow up on his own ideas. Today, almost everybody has heard of Newton, but aside from a few freshmen studying elasticity, who can remember Hooke? In Christ, the overseer of his servants, Russ Humphreys. Wow. Okay, so you're getting all the information here, and you can come to your own conclusions. Okay, that was Brown to Austin. Robinson to Brown to Austin. Okay, let's see what else we have on this round 4. Okay, that was Austin to Robinson. Okay. Okay, I think we read this already. I think. Oh, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. So this is Austin to Robinson again. This is August 29th. Okay, let's see what we read before. Austin to Robinson. Oh, this is October 4th. Okay. August 29th. Okay. All right. Here we go. August 29th. Well, I wish these were in order, but we'll get this. Okay. August 29th. Professor Peter Robinson. This, I believe, is from Austin. Dear Peter, this letter concerns the Brown-Austin Mediation Agreement, which was established on June 21st. Specifically, this letter concerns the revision of EndNote number 40, which is the first item mentioned in the mediation agreement. Less than 800 copies of Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe remain in our warehouse. Although summer sales have been slow, we believe that orders will soon increase, thus we need to prepare for the second printing of the book almost immediately. This brings us to the purpose of EndNote number 40. The most important question you can ask is, what is the purpose of EndNote 40? The reason I wrote EndNote 40 was to provide a short history survey of the various workers who have contributed to our understanding of breach dam models. The EndNote's purpose is to survey workers in historical order, not to provide detail concerning their explanations. Providing detail of explanation is for the other text and EndNotes, such as EndNote 62. Because Walter has no claim from the June 21st mediation to revise EndNote 62, he wants to include detail of his theory in EndNote 40. This EndNote already is the longest EndNote in the book. If the reader needs more detailed concerning evidence and interpretation, the EndNote gives a bibliographic citation so the reader can go to these sources, including such detail I maintain is improper for EndNote 40. Attachment A is my suggested revision of EndNote 40. It involves changing to the one sentence which was mentioned in the table on June 21st. I think you will remember our conversation on June 21st involved one sentence of EndNote number 40. My suggestion is that this sentence is to be revised. Okay, page 2. Later, after reading Austin's 1988 field book, Walter Brown offered specific details to the theory in the beginning for the scientific center. Okay. I suggest the sentence be revised. A theory concerning the breaching event, including names and locations of lakes, was offered by Dr. Walt Brown. I believe that this revised edition would not be offensive to Walt Brown. Attachment A shows my suggested revision for EndNote 40, typeset with proportional typeface and the same margin spacing as the EndNote in the book. You will notice that the EndNote remains 65 lines long and will not cause a new page to need to be added to the book. If EndNote number 40 is more than 65 lines long, the book from page 100 to 284 will be repaged. This is why EndNote 40 must remain 65 lines long. On August 22nd, I telephoned Walt and responded to his proposed revision to EndNote 40. We spent over 1 hour discussing the content of EndNote 40, and I commented on his claimed inaccuracies in the EndNote. Let's see my comments on attachment C. It seems that getting the name Grand Lake into EndNote number 40 is a top priority for Walt. Attachment B is Walt's suggested revision to EndNote 40 from his August 11th letter. His suggested revision has been typeset using proportional typeface and the same margin spacing as the book's first printing EndNote. You will notice that Walt's revision is a total of 88 lines. This would cause 23 lines of text from page 110 to be displaced to page 111. All pages of the book beginning at chapter 6, pages 111 to 284, would have to be bumped up 2 page numbers. The business office at ICR tells me that repaging more than half the book, especially repositioning color figures at the last half of the book, would cost several thousands of dollars. It is a wise use of the resources the Lord has. Wait, is this a wise use of the resources that the Lord has entrusted to us? Are 23 added lines of an endnote that important? In my letter to Walt, dated July 25th, I requested that his revision to the endnote be very short, not requiring repaging all the book after page 109. Unfortunately, Walt's revision of August 11th and added 23 lines to endnote 40. I believe this revision should contain no extra lines. Why no longer use the name Grand Lake for an ancient lake in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico is attachment D. This manuscript could be useful as we draft the door document, which both Walt and I co-author, as called for the mediation agreement. Page 3, I wrote the manuscript so you can understand my position on Walt's Grand Lake. It will help you see why I want to keep the name Grand Lake out of the endnotes number 40, or endnote 62 deals with Grand Lake. It appears that Walt and I have reached a deadlock concerning endnote number 40. It is up to you to decide, should ICR add 23 lines to endnotes 40 and repage over half the book, or should a revision be sought which enables by the spacing limitations that the first printing of the book allows? It is your choice. Does ICR spend several $1,000s to accommodate the short endnote revision of Walt Brown? Sincerely yours in Christ, Steve Austin. And then he's got the footnotes. Okay. And I don't think we're going to go through these all again. But you can read them if you screen share, or just stop, pause it if you want. Attachment B, Bounds recommended endnote number 40 revision, August 11th, 1984. Okay, what did we do here? What's added? All right. There's some difference here, and there's too many lines apparently, but I'll let you. It's probably this right here. Brown discovered where a very large lake at an elevation 5,700 feet once occupied much of southeast Utah. I wonder if we can. Utah and parts of Colorado. Brown claims the brand. Yeah, is that going to be up on this one? Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah. That's probably what was added. This part about Walt Brown. That's what he wants to take out of there. So anyhow, attachments Brown's problems and inaccuracies, July 6th with Austin's notes. Okay, wow, this is getting long. But to be fair, I suppose we should read this. Okay, round 4 goes along. Yep. Attachment C, Brown's problems and inaccuracies, July 6th with Austin's notes. Paragraphs appearing in italic from font style are those of Steve Austin. Endnote 40. The concept of rapid breaching of the Kaibab upward by drainage from lake has long history. The concept was expressed by J.S. Newberry in 1861. And also, okay, a specific number rather than giving length of the document, 154 pages, would be helpful. Newberry did not specifically mention the Kaibab upward or even refer to the geographic region. Besides, he was trying to explain the much smaller canyons below Grand Canyon, not the Grand Canyon itself. My report I sent to you on July 6, 1993 explains this in more detail. And hints of follow the work of Elliot Blackwell in 1934. Hints followed is vague. The reader has no idea what you might mean. Blackwelder added little beyond Newberry's contribution. So Austin adds, Walt will have a problem relating to the work of Newberry and Blackwelder because he does not accept the fundamental notion upon which their conclusions are based, that the geologic structure, the Kaibab upward and the southern Colorado Plateau were in a place were in place before major erosion occurred. Walt believes that the upward structure didn't begin to form until after sheet erosion of the plateau began. Blackwater's work is an impressive statement of the superposition drainage theory and is quite unique among geologic literature. All the Blackwater welder would need to do is add piping or even overtopping mechanism to his proposal. He does not speculate on the mechanism for superimposing the drainage. Did he need to speculate? Okay, geologic evidence of a large lake. Okay. Large lake in the northeast Arizona. Hopi Lake was provided by Howell Williams in 1936. Okay, Bowles thought tectonic activity interrupted. The meaning is clear if you use active voice. You don't say why Bowles reached his conclusions. Thus, you are appealing to authority using the passive voice, making it vague authority. Only a careful reader would realize you are only selecting vague opinion that supports your purpose. You are not giving evidence. Walt is right. This is what Austin writes. Walt is right. I am not giving evidence. The purpose of EndNote number 40 is to review in summary fashion the workers that have contributed to the discussion concerning the breach dam concept, not to provide details of their explanation or evidence for their conclusions. The reader is invited by the EndNote to consult these authors for details. The EndNote does not need to explain why Bowles reached his conclusions. Bowles did propose a piping failure model that is noteworthy among uniformitarian literature. I thought it was significant enough to make short mention in this historical summary. Okay, creationists were suggesting catastrophic drainage models in the 1960s and 70s. And what creationists were doing this in the 1960s and 70s besides Burdick is what Brown asks. And Austin answers, I'm aware of 4 creationists who were suggesting catastrophic drainage models in the 60s and 70s. Clifford Burdick in 1968, Bernard Northrup, Conversation and Lectures in 68, and Edward Navziger, Conversations in 70, and Steve Austin did the first lecture on Grand Canyon erosion in the summer of 1970. One of the most noteworthy early creation statements of the breach dam theory appeared in writings of Clifford Burdick. Okay, then I think this is Walt. Burdick's one paragraph statement was not most noteworthy, as you say. Burdick visualized an east-west tension crack forming at the top of the Kaibab upward as it rose. He did not say why the Kaibab rose or why the plateau rose or why the crack was east-west. Actually, such a crack would not have formed in an east-west direction, but rather along the Kaibab Plateau ridge line where the tensile strength was the greatest. Burdick then said floodwaters flowed westward off the rising Rocky Mountains through the east-west crack before water could be high enough to flow through even a 1,000-foot crack at the top of the Kaibab upward. It would have breached over top much further to the southeast, such as near Show Low, Arizona. Even if water spilled through the Burdick east-west crack, the westward drainage would hardly have bent north toward the elevated flanks of the Kaibab upward. This is the direction the Colorado River flows today. We both know from our diggings in the ground that Hopi Lake once existed. A lake could not have existed there without a dam at its west end. Burdick's scenario removes any hope for such a dam, since he has the most erosion occurring as the floodwaters flowed off the Rockies. Therefore, Burdick's scenario is wrong. I realize you are not intending to analyze Burdick's explanation, but it hardly deserves the description most noteworthy. Some problems I listed above pertain to any explanation in which the Kaibab upward was in place before Hopi Lake emptied. Your explanation fails in that category. Nor did Burdick explain why the Rockies rose, a very important question. You have not explained or addressed it either, Steve. If you think about it, you will see that the sudden formation of the Rockies is critical to the formation of the Colorado Plateau, which in turn is critical to the formation of the Grand Canyon. If you disagree, tell me how plateaus form. Several times you refer to the Laramide orogeny, but that is a name, not an explanation. It is a fancy name which impresses the and intimidates the uninitiated, but hides the fact that geologists don't have the foggiest idea why the Rockies rose. The simplistic statement in the textbooks on how plate tectonic causes the Rockies are full of holes, which some experts on mountain building have readily and sheepishly admitted to me in face-to-face conversations. I suspect that most geologists, in using the term Vladimir orogeny or any orogeny, are aware that the mechanism for buckling up mountains is a mystery to the experts. I explained on page 58 to 83 of my book the mechanisms for mountain building and plateau formation. Then I explained the immediate events that formed the Grand Canyon. I also explained where the water went after the flood. Burdick did not touch that question either, and creationists do usually say that the ocean suddenly got deeper or a wind blew away the water, Northrop, for example. Obviously, such explanations raise more questions and problems than they answer. I probably would not have come up with the Grand Lake explanation had I not had a clear picture of how and why the water drained off the continents after the flood. Then I realized there would have been thousands of very large post-flood lakes, some at very high elevations. Large, high lakes are another prerequisite for forming the Grand Canyon. All of this bears directly on your false claim a few lines below that in 1988 I read your theory of how the Grand Canyon formed and added some details. Austin responds, Burdick's work deserves mention in the historical survey and in note 40. To leave this man's name out of the historical survey would be a serious error. Burdick's work is noteworthy not necessarily because he had all the details correctly stated, an issue ignored in the historical survey of the endnote, but because of his influence on other workers. Ed Holroyd, for example, read an abstract of Burdick's work and was motivated to conduct his study. Ed told me this personally. Okay, Bernard Northrop proposed in 1968 the erosion of Grand Canyon was caused by a release of trapped glacial meltwaters in the post-flood period centuries after Noah's flood. Walt Brown writes, Northrop proposal was in 1986, not 1968. You copied an error in Bernard E. Northrop discussion, Proceedings of the Second International Conference of Creationism, 1990, Volume 2. In that 1990 reference, Northrop said he originally proposed that the Kaibab Upward was the temporary dam. You speculated earlier on such an event. Northrop now feels my explanation is correct. I originally had proposed that the Kaibab Coconino uplift itself had to be a temporary dam. However, presently, I think that Walt Brown is correct in proposing the Vermilion Echo Cliff uplift was the barrier between the ice waters impounded. The correct reference of Northrop's 1986 work is there really was an ice age. Proceedings of the Second International Conference of Creationism, Volume 1 in Pittsburgh in 1986. In 1988, after spending hours trying to understand some of the geography he mentioned in that paper, I called Northrop and concluded, along with him, that he had used several incorrect names and dates and details. He admitted to me that his lake could not have held water. Then I told him some of my thoughts on Grand Lake and offered to take him there to see the evidence. Okay, Austin replies, here Walt Brown is in serious error about the date and content. Walt says I copied an error, but he is inaccurate. With my own ears, I heard Bernard Northrop describe in a public lecture at a catastrophic post-flood breaching theory for the Grand Canyon in the summer of 1968 in Lucerne, California. The year is certainly 1968, not 1986, as Walt states. I confirmed the truth of the written statement by telephone conversation in July of 1994 with Bernard Northrop. I read the endnote to Northrop, and he said that the statement as written in the endnote is correct. Okay, post-flood ponding of water east of Grand Lake behind a tectonic upwarp was suggested as the cause of leading to the cutting of the canyon by Stephen A. Austin and John H. Whitcomb in the guidebook of 1986. What's suggested is too strong. You simply wondered. You knew that researchers decades earlier had concluded that Hopi Lake, at least the east of the Grand Canyon, had been there, but before the fall of 1988, you only questioned whether a breaching of the Kaibab upwarp formed the Grand Canyon. When you wrote tectonic upward above, you meant an upward caused by tectonics. Both phrases lack meaning. To see what I mean, let's loosely define tectonics as deformations of the Earth's crust. Therefore, saying an upward caused by the deformation of the Earth's crust is vacuous, vacuous, and circular. The question you must answer is, what caused the upward? I give you my answer in our discussion after the mediation session 2 weeks ago. You may not like the mechanical engineers dabbling in geology. You may not like mechanical engineers dabbling in geology. However, until clear cause and effect mechanisms, all of which happen to be engineering mechanisms, are provided, geologists are avoiding the meaty aspects of their science. And Austin replies, Austin and Whitmore, 1986, made a legitimate suggestion that Grand Canyon was eroded after a post-flood ponding of water occurred behind the Kaibab upwarp. There was no wondering or musing over some possibilities, just simple proposal. In this 1986 statement occurs with a map. The map is perhaps the first creationist map circulated on the subject of erosion of Grand Canyon. Maps are a significant addition to creation explanations of Grand Canyon. Okay, Edwin W. Holroyd recognized that the lake bigger than one of the Great Lakes could be contained upstream of Grand Canyon if the canyon was blocked approximately at the 5,600-foot elevation. Missing talus in 1987. The breach dam theory was described in 1988 in a field guidebook, Stephen Austin, 1988. Okay, while Brown says, you describe no breach dam theory of yours for the formation of Grand Canyon in that book. You only explain that some dams have breached. If you disagree, please reproduce the pages that contain your theory and highlight your specific words giving the mechanistic details. You said you favored catastrophic drainage and then asked some questions such as, could the large dam created by Kaibab upward have been breached, allowing the lake behind it to drain over the plateaus through northern Arizona, initiating the erosion of Grand Canyon? Lately, I've been supposing, unquote. You admitted there will need to be more investigation of how Grand Canyon was eroded. A theory is a cause and effect framework supported by much evidence that answers many questions and gives broad new insights. Supposings do not make a theory. Your supposings raised many questions such as, how did the Kaibab upwarp form? How do upwarps in general occur? How did the Colorado Plateau, which contains the Grand Canyon, form? How do all the plateaus form? Where did the energy and force come from for these gigantic events? Were these processes slow or fast, and why? If the Kaibab upwarp was established before the Colorado River was positioned across northern Arizona, as you have written, what repositioned the Colorado River, and where was it before? Where and how was the natural dam breached? If it breached by overlapping, how does water flow 1,400 feet uphill? If it breached by piping, how does water flow rapidly enough through 30 miles of limestone, having less porosity than concrete piping? Circumstantial evidence is fine, but can you show that the lake's water was sufficient to carry the huge volume of Mesozoic and Paleozoic sediments off northern Arizona? Why didn't it breach at the lower elevations further to the south? Because of the many questions, actually problems raised by your supposings, it hardly constitutes a theory. Without these answers, few would dare announce, I have a theory, and you never did. Austin responds, whether Walt Brown likes it or not, Austin's 1988 writing does contain 5 pages dedicated specifically to catastrophic drainage explanation for erosion of Grand Canyon. That is a longer statement than in any other previous creation publication. The 1988 writing was a proposal and a discussion of evidence favoring the breach dam. Because of its length and content, the 1988 writing by Austin is a contribution worthy of mention in the historical survey of EndNote number 40. The 1988 writing has a lengthy bibliography on erosion theories with annotations. This may be the first creationist bibliography on erosion of Grand Canyon to be circulated among creationists. Walt has a problem with the use of the word theory. Geologists often use the word in a less rigorous fashion. It may be offensive to engineers or physicists. The tendency is especially evident in geologist theories for the origin of landscapes. Okay, back to the EndNote. Later, after reading Austin's 1988 field guide, Walt Brown Jr. offered specific details to the theory, 1989. Walt Brown writes, the theory, again, you laid out no theory. You also make it sound as if I got my basic ideas from you, then added a few details. Wrong. Incidentally, my answers to the questions I raised in my last paragraph are contained not just on page 83, but on pages 58 to 83, most of which is necessary background reading. I also wrote about the Grand Canyon on page 58 and 75 and 76. Austin has a statement written in 1993 by Walt Brown. The statement says that Brown read the 1988 field guide book of Austin before Brown conducted field work in the summer of 1988. That field work was important as it allowed Brown to draw conclusions. The steps in Brown's theorizing about Grand Canyon erosion appear to be in this order: reading, observing, interpreting, and writing. Okay, the footnote continues. Interesting field evidences for catastrophic drainage of lakes and dialogue concerning the history of discussions is found in Edmund W. Holroyd's Missing Talus, 1990. Brown writes, Holroyd's name is misspelled. Holroyd, yep. Holroyd's name is misspelled. What is dialogue, quote, dialogue concerning the history of discussions, unquote? It would be more accurate to say, as Holroyd did, that one of the explanations for the missing talus was wave destruction of previous talus at the shorelines of recently extinct lakes. You overstate when you write that the missing talus, which many researchers have commented on, is interesting field evidence for catastrophic drainage of lakes. A former wave-battered shoreline is one possible explanation for the missing talus. There are many others, as Holroyd acknowledges. Catastrophic drainage is completely different phenomena. Austin replies, the dialogue concerning history of discussions is the reviewer's response to Holroyd's paper. The reviewer's comments are published just after Holroyd's paper with Holroyd's reply. That is dialogue. Remember, the purpose of EndNote number 40 is to provide a short historical survey of the various workers who have contributed to our understanding of breach dam models. The purpose of the EndNote is to survey workers in historical order, not to provide detail concerning explanations. Holroyd's 1990 work is significant and deserves mention. Also, the dialogue after the paper is significant. The details of Holroyd's evidence are discussed elsewhere, not in the EndNote. Okay, the EndNote goes on. A summary of some of these theories was published by E.L. Williams. Dr. Brown writes, their primary and positive discussion concerned what I published in 1989. They knew nothing of the nature that you had written previously. Further comments, this is the footnote. Further comments were provided by Michael Ord in 1993. Walt Brown writes, it would be more accurate to say that Michael Ord provided 5 criticisms of Austin's views in the Grand Canyon's formation. I've talked by phone to Michael Ord and Emmett Williams, who reviewed Mike's paper and explained to each how all 5 problems Mike raised with your variation are still answered by what I have written. Reviewed and explained to each how all 5 problems Mike raised with your variation are answered by what I have written. And Steve Austin writes, The purpose of EndNote 40 is to provide the historical survey of workers. Those interested in comments on the breach dam theory could read the paper by Michael Ord. The purpose of the EndNote has been achieved if the reader knows where to go to get more information. Also, the EndNote gives credit to various authors who have contributed to scholarship and science. Okay. And this is Appendix D, why I no longer use the word Grand Lake for an ancient lake near Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. By Steve Austin, PhD, first draft, August 29th, 1994. Since the late 1970s, I have been fascinated with what have been called superposed theories for the erosion of Grand Canyon. These explanations seek to answer how Grand Canyon has been eroded by significant geological processes and to be superimposed across pre-existing geological structure. I have been especially interested in catastrophic drainage modes and breach dam explanations. The purpose of this short paper is to discuss the name of a lake which may have been involved in erosion of Grand Canyon. In particular, this paper will address nomenclature suggested by Walter T. Brown. In August 1986, after a conversation with Edwin W. Holroyd, I was interested in knowing exactly where an ancient lake would plot if Grand Canyon were blocked by a very large obstruction. Ed Holroyd supplied me an excellent answer in the January of 1987 in the form of a Kodak color picture. The color print was a computer database plot of a 4-state area showing the shoreline of a large lake at an elevation of 1,700 meters on the Colorado Plateau. Ed needed the color print returned to him, so I made a very rough tracing of the shoreline on an acetate physiographic base map. I next made a sketch on paper and retained both in my personal records. The paper sketch, figure 2, bears the name Lake Kaibab, as it suggests the highest elevation lake which could form today behind Kaibab upward in Grand Canyon if Grand Canyon were blocked. This sketch was distributed with Ed's permission and redrafted in form in March of 1989 as Grand Canyon Field Study Tour Guide, April 1989. The redrafted version is shown in Figure 3. Let's see Figure 1 and Figure 3. Where are they? Figure 1 and Figure 3. Oh boy, what's that? Figure 1. I can't see the lake there. Let's go to Figure 3. This is Figure 2. There are the lakes. Kaibab Lake. Okay. And here's Figure 3, I believe. Yeah, Figure 3. Interesting. Okay, so where are we at? Oh boy, do we got some reading to do. Okay, we read that. Read that. Okay, here we are. Okay, Big Lake in Utah. From studies of the possible locations of ancient lakes north and east of Grand Canyon, I have been impressed by how lakes seem to fit into 3 basins: the Little Colorado River Basin in northeast Arizona, the Canyonlands Basin in southeast Utah, and the Vernal Basin in northeast Utah. Figures 1, 2, and 3 suggest 3 natural basins which might be locations of ancient lakes. The computer's plot is not to form lakes. The computer plot is not the former lakes. It is only suggests their location. The only basin with demonstrated lake sediment is in northeast Arizona. Those deposits of the Pliocene lakes have been called the Chattahoochee Formation, and the associated body of water is called Hopi Lake by Howell Williams in 1936. Demonstrated Pliocene lake sediments have not yet been found in the other 2 basins, and before 1989, only informal names were proposed by creationists for possible lakes, which may have existed in those 2 basins. Bernard Northrup had proposed that these 2 northern basins were actually occupied by one higher elevation water body, what he'd been called Lake Kaparitwitz, according to the Second International Conference of Creationism in 1990, also proceedings of the First International Conference in 1986. You will notice that Northrop used variations from the correct spelling Kapaporitz. Was aware of these basins. Okay, Clifford Burdick was aware of these basins, but left the name of the lakes or lakes unspecified. Some of Burdick's writings or summary of Burdick's writings in the Bible Science newsletter influenced Ed Holroyd in his search. Okay, Walt Brown suggested the name of Grand Lake for an entire body of water, which occupied a larger basin of southeastern Utah, including also some of the Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. His definition of the lake first appeared in his book In the Beginning, 5th edition, 1989. A map was also included and is shown in Figure 4. I first encountered the 5th edition of Walt Brown's book in August of 1989, evidently only a few weeks after it had been published. I had no other earlier contact with Walt Brown's lake theory. The name Grand Lake suggested by Brown seems superior to Northrop's Lake Kaparitz, so I used the name Grand Lake in the Canyons guidebook. Years 1990 to 1993. Unfortunately, I did not reference Brown as the source of the name Grand Lake until 1993 issue of Grand Lakes Field Guides Tour Guide. The lack of citation of Brown in the earlier issues of the field guide may have led to some to believe that I was the source of the name Grand Lake. That supposition, of course, incorrect. Walt Brown is the true source of the name. I've always been unsettled by the use of the name Grand Lake, and now I believe use of the name should be discontinued. The primary problem is the poor definition of Walter Brown's publication. The lake is described by Brown by existing within the topographic basin north of Hopi. There is no elevation given to the publication for Grand Lake, but personal communication with Brown, 1993, indicated his assessment to the lake of 5,700 feet elevation. Perhaps Brown should clear up the uncertainty concerning the elevation of Grand Lake by including the elevation in his next publication. I did not know of the lake's elevation until I had this communication with Walt Brown in 1993. I was aware of the definition problems when I compared the computer plotted lake derived by Ed Holroyd, which suggests by Figure 3 with Brown's proposed lake at 5,700 feet. I became perplexed by the plotting of Brown's Grand Lake when I prepared an antecedent sheet photocopy of Brown's Grand Lake map and projected that outline to be on larger topographic map in the state of Utah. I paid special attention to obtaining the best fit between Brown's map and the slightly different base of the state topographic map. The results are almost extraordinary and are summarized in Figure 5. Brown's Grand Lake covers some of the highest mountains in Utah and extends westward out of Colorado drainage basin. The city of Kennep, point A in Figure 5, is 5,000 feet elevation on the Kaibab Creek, a direct tributary to Grand Canyon, not behind a barrier or dam. The Aquarius Plateaus includes more than 500 square miles of very elevated topography, a large area over 9,000 feet above sea level, including Boulder Mountain. The western shore of the lake is at a near Signal Peak, 1,100 feet, with the Xavier River drainage basin. The Henry Mountains occupy an area 200 square miles, are more than 1,000 feet elevation, as is the larger area known as the Wasatch Plateaus. Are submerged. The Rock Cliffs are submerged to about 8,000 feet. Within the waters of Grand Lake are the LaSalle Mountains and include summits over 12,000 elevation and 400 miles area called the Abijah Mountains, including the summit 11,000 feet elevation. And that's on Figure 4 and 5. Okay, one gets the impression that Grand Lake of Brown does not conform to modern topographic features if its elevation is supposed to be 5,700 feet. The plotting by Ed Holroyd is much superior to Brown's. The definition problem is my main reason for discontinuing the use of the name Grand Lake. The second important reason exists for discontinuing the use of the name Grand. Oh, let's take a look at Figure 5 and 6. Okay, that's what he wrote, and this is what Grand Lake. Hopi Lake. I suppose those could be islands. Okay. What else do we have here? Vernal Lake. All right. So this is why he doesn't use Grand Lake. So again, we're getting all the information out there so people can make informed decisions. Okay, and it's good to see both sides. Okay, this is where we're at. One gets the impression that Grand Lake of Brown does not conform to modern. Okay. A second important reason is Grand Lake. Description of the lake occupied a very large region in the upper Colorado drainage basin, including western Colorado. The problem is that there is already a Grand Lake in the upper Colorado River drainage basin. Grand Lake is a modern lake next to the Colorado River in north central Colorado at an elevation of 8,367 feet. The body of water called Grand Lake is situated south of the town of Grand Lake, which can be found on almost every road map in the state of Colorado. The Grand Lake Entrance Station is one of two public entry roads into Rocky Mountain National Park. Thus, the modern Grand Lake and its name are not inconspicuous geographic features within the upper Colorado River drainage basin. That name has priority over Brown's by 100 years. Imagine how you would feel if you lived next to the Colorado River in the town of Grand Lake, Colorado. Let's suppose you were looking out your living room window at the clear blue waters of Grand Lake as you were reading Walt Brown's description of the lake in Colorado called Grand Lake. You might be confused, even upset. I know of a very large unnamed canyon in the Trigo Mountains of western Arizona. Should we call it Grand Canyon? Of course not. The proposed name is unsatisfactory because of prior use. In recent telephone conversation with Roger L. Payne, director of Branch Geographic Names, he said we discourage the use of duplicate names. He mentioned specifically the problem of having so many bodies of water called Mud Lake in Arkansas. Have you been fishing in Mud Lake lately? If so, which Mud Lake? A solution to the naming problem. In 1984, I proposed a solution to the naming problem. Stephen A. Austin and named Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe. 1994, I proposed the name Canyonlands Lake for the large body of water which appears to have been occupied the major portion of the extraordinary canyon country of southeast Utah. Figure 6 is a sketch map suggesting the location of Canyonlands Lake. There is geologic evidence that this lake had an elevation of above 5,800 feet in some areas, making it somewhat higher than the computer plot outline suggested by Ed Holroyd and the level proposed by Walt Brown. Canyonlands Lake has three distinct advantages over Grand Lake. First, the outline of Canyonlands Lake conforms more closely to the recent topography of the Colorado Plateau, and we may suppose conforms better to the ancient land surface. The main assumption is that a high topographic barrier existed just east of Kanab, Utah, allowing the lake to exist above 5,800 feet elevation. A second assumption is that Canyonlands Lake was separated from Hopi Lake by a topographic barrier. The present topography of the Cayabito Plateau would call Canyonlands Lake to remain distinct from Hopi Lake. If either or both had elevated up to 6,100 feet, above 6,100 feet, they become one lake. Second, the name Canyonlands Lake is more descriptive of the major area occupied by the lake. This includes the extraordinary topography of the Canyonlands area, the goosenecks of the San Juan River, Monument Valley, and countless spectacular sapping structures of Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. Third, the name does not have usage conflict with other established geographic names. A review of the more than 2 million names in the National Geographic Names Delta database showed no conflict for the four-state area where Canyonlands Lake was located. Therefore, I'm using the name Canyonlands Lake to recommend that others do so as well. A word of caution. The purpose of this short paper was to discuss the names of the lake which may have existed north of Hopi Lake. It is important to recognize that Hopi Lake, which is well documented by Pliocene sedimentary deposits, was the primary agent responsible for initiating the breach through which the Kaibab upwarp and establishing the location of Grand Canyon. I believe that the focus of our attention should be on Hopi Lake, not on Canyonlands Lake, as this short paper might suggest. It is important to recognize that Hopi Lake, which is well documented as the primary agent responsible for initiating the breach through the Kaibab Plateau. Interesting. Okay, and here's the computer plot by Holroyd, I believe, 1,700 meters. The map of antecedent sheet with very rough tracing from photographic print supplied by Edmund Holroyd. The tracing was made by Steve Austin in January of 1987, indicates how a large lake could conform to the topography of the Colorado Plateau. This tracing on was the first acetate was the first step in preparing the paper copy. It's 50% reduced. Okay. This is his handwritten copy. Oh, interesting. He's got them connected there. Interesting. Sketch map hand drawn on paper by Steve Austin from the acetate tracing. Note Lake Kaibab, suggestive of the highest level lake which would form if Grand Canyon were blocked. This sketch map is very rough and needed to be replotted before distribution with further input from Edwin Holroyd. Okay, so basically they're just damming up right here. Interesting. And this is Walt Brown's, I believe. A computer was asked to draw the shoreline of the lake which would form behind the Kaibab upwarp if the Grand Canyon were blocked at the 5,700-foot elevation. The lake which would form is shown above. It would contain the water of 3 Great Lakes. This computer-generated lake approximations the outline of the ancient lake which breached its dam to form Grand Canyon. All right. Figure 3, map and caption of this map distributed in March 1889 to 100 participants in the Institute of Creation Research Field Study Tour. Okay, the map was drafted by Steve Austin. Edwin Holroyd requested that he not be credited as source in the first distribution of the map. Holroyd later published his own draft version of the map. All right. Lake map first published by Walt Brown in the summer of 1989. This map appears without caption and is shown here in a 200% enlargement of the original in the beginning. 5th edition, 1989. The map of Walt Brown with letters superimposed by Steve Austin. The letters indicate locations of important physiogeographic features. Let's shrink this down. Okay, A. Where's A? A over here. Town of Kanab, elevation 5,000 feet. Yeah, that's not a problem, because the lake would have been 5,700 feet. Aquara Plateau, 1,100 feet. B. Okay. C. Signal Peak, 1,100 feet. All right. D. Henry Mountains, 1,100 feet. West Plateau, E. 1,000 feet or 10,000 feet. F. Roan Cliffs. LaSalle Mountains, 12,000 feet. G. And H. Havajah Mountains, 11,000 feet. Okay. All righty. So it'd be more dense. Okay. Lake location map publisher by Steve Austin. Note Canyonlands Lake. So it's not as big. Okay. Yeah, there's some details that could be corrected. That's fine. All right. Wow, we've done a lot. So this was what, round 4? This was the mediation, or an answer to the mediation. Let's see what we got here. Austin to Robinson. This is August or September of 29. Okay, that's a good place to stop. Wow. We did a lot on this one. Okay, let's go to StreamYard. Let's take this removed. All right. So we've gone through some of the mediation results. We've gone through the answers of Walt Brown and how Austin answered those questions. And again, we just want to get all the information out there. I'm not here to tell you what to think. This is just getting all the information out there. And the main motivation of this is there is a theory that's making accurate predictions and it's being kicked to the curb. And I think this is one of the reasons. There's some mud that's being thrown out around, and we just want this to be dealt with and then bring that hydroplate theory into the fold, because a theory that's making accurate predictions and is being validated by NASA discoveries should be worth discussing. It should be it should be allowed for people to think about that. And so again, we are not, we're not here to throw mud. We're not here to make organizations look bad, but we are here to, help a science advance. Taking a secular model and speeding it up is not necessarily as good as looking at the Bible and looking what the Bible says, and then also making accurate predictions. And so again, this is a grassroots movement. If a theory doesn't make accurate predictions, it is weak science. And you should be asking, when people are giving you ideas, ask them, what are the predictions of this theory? What are the accurate predictions? What are the current predictions? And what's the biblical support for it? And what I really want is creation organizations, creation museums specifically, and centers to allow people to think about flood models, because all that's being presented is one model. And if that happens, people don't think, they just memorize. And that's what the evolutionists and the blind chancers do with the Big Bang and evolution. They just preach their dogma and they don't let people think about another view. And as creationists, I think we should set an example. There's competing theories out there. Let's show both of them, let people think, and let people come to their own conclusion. And I think the museum that does this first will see their donations go up. You want to educate people. And the hydroplate theory is a powerful weapon for evangelism. And so this is what we need to do. We need to equip people with a theory that makes accurate predictions, and then stand strong on the Bible and reach people for Christ. That's what this is all about. A lot of people are turning their back on the Bible because they say it doesn't answer, they think that geologists and the blind chancers have it all figured out. And no, we got a theory that makes accurate predictions, and it's time for it to be shouted from the mountaintops. And if this is one of the growing pains that we have to go through to make that light come about, this is what we have to do. I mean, all this stuff was happening 31 years ago. I think the time, and we've been some very patient people. And I think it's time to shine the spotlight on it, bring it into the public discussion. And then the big question for me is, why don't you talk about a theory that makes accurate predictions? That just boggles my mind. I can see why blind chancers don't want to do that, because it validates the Bible. But why wouldn't creationists want to do that? If you have any ideas, feel free to put it in the comment. But anyhow, thank you so much for providing, an hour and 40 minutes on this. So that was round 4. We went from round 1, which was, it all begins with the letters. Round 2 was setting the record straight. And then round 3, I think, was arbitration. And round 4 was mediation, something like that. And so we will just show you. Let me share something with you again. And if you want to hear people, this is going to Hydroplate Week of Celebration. And I would encourage you to search Albright, because she researched all this stuff, and you can see, that her interview, she, all these people, a lot, 16, and she did a really good job of analyzing it. A lot of her stuff is up there. And it's kind of sad what has happened, and we're trying to rectify that. So that is on Hydroplate Week of Celebration, and you can listen to what somebody who studied it had to say. And again, we're not here to make people look bad or make organizations look bad, but we do think that the truth should be revealed, especially if souls are at stake. And to keep a theory that's making accurate predictions and it's being validated by NASA discoveries ignored or censored while souls are at stake is not something I want to answer to. I want to say, I want everybody to hear the truth. And this is a theory that's not gospel. It's not a sacred cow. If it's wrong, I mean, there's details that could be wrong. But I think the framework is there since it's making accurate predictions. And what bothers me is when creation organizations have sacred cows that you can't even question. You can't even ask about another theory. And that's not right. Theory, CPT and PT and HPT, they're just theories. They're not scripture. They're not infallible. And a good indicator of a good theory is that it makes accurate predictions. And again, I'll just do this real quick for you. If you want to see what the accurate predictions are, go into hpt.rsr.org. Go in there. You can download the 9th edition for free. And this is not the one that's being printed. This is a draft. There might be some, just think of it as a proofreading copy. Command F and go into predictions. And it's going to give you every one that it's ever been listed. And we're going to go up because it's on page 470 of the book. Oh, I think we missed it. Okay. Frequently asked questions. What page is that? Yeah, we're going to have to go down. There it is. What are the predictions of the hydroplate theory? If a theory doesn't make predictions, it is weak science. And here are 58. 58 of them. One was wrong. There's probably been about 20 of them that have been confirmed. And you can see this. Look for yourself. And here the bold ones are confirmed. Fred McNabb has gone through and he's confirmed 19 other ones, or 19 of them. So that's the sign of a robust theory, and it's making predictions in a lot of different areas of science, from astronomy to geology. And so let's see, did I share that with you? Oh, I did. I am so sorry. This is how you get the download. Okay, we'll try this once again. We'll just go on up here. We're going to go into hpt.rsr.org, hpt.rsr.org. You go in there, and here's the flip book. You click on that, you get it, you Command F and type predictions, and then you start at the bottom and you go up because it's towards the end of the book. And that's going to be on page 470. And these are the predictions of the hydroplate theory. There's one that's been wrong. There's probably Fred McNabb says there's 19 of them that are accurate. And I found another one. So there's 20 of them. And so if a theory doesn't make predictions, it's a weak theory. And so that's what we need to start asking. Grassroots. This is a grassroots movement. It's not going to start at the top. The top have had this information for 31 years, and what's happened? It's still ignored. So we want people to start asking questions. When you're at creation museums or hear creation speakers, start asking about the hydroplate theory. What do you think of the hydroplate, accurate predictions of the hydroplate theory? What accurate predictions have you made? What are your predictions? And what is your biblical support? And I think if enough people start asking those questions, and all we want is the ability to think about flood models. That shouldn't be such a heavy lift. Let's see which museum lets us compare and contrast. And so like the Boneyards Museum out in Broken Bow, Nebraska, they've got the hydroplate in there. So everybody's going for second place there. That's the only museum I know that has it. But what I'd really like to see, and Broken Bow might do this too, is have a display, the flood models. This is the hydroplate, and this is the catastrophic plate tectonic. And then just show the accurate predictions of each one. And then show the current predictions of each one. And then show the biblical support that distinguishes it from other flood models. And that would be a powerful display showing how the hydroplate theory seems to be on the right track. And a secular model sped up has been a diversion. So anyhow, that's what we do. We just ask you to get involved, start asking questions, and start thinking. Just there's two sides to every story. It's like that. Beware of one hand clapping. There's two sides to every story. If you only hear one side over and over and over again, it's probably because the truth is being censored by those who have the power to do it. And that's what the evolutionists do in the science room and the blind chancers, Big Bang and evolution. That's all that's allowed in government schools, museums, and media. And as Christians, we should have a higher standard. If there's two flood models, present them both. Lead by example. Show the evolutionists how to do it. When you have a competing theory, put it up there. And so then people can think. And again, I think the first museum to do that will have a lot of prestige. People will look back fondly on them as leading us out of the dark ages. Because we're in the dark ages. You know, the evolutionists, they have their dogma, their blind chance perspective. They don't allow anything else. And that's what the creationists do also. You know, as far as flood models, they got their own model. They don't allow anything else. There are people that are coerced into silence, which is a shame. You should be able to go wherever the evidence leads. You should be able to ask questions about any theory and not fear retribution. You should be able to make videos about any theory and not fear worrying about losing a big chunk of your income. Okay, and so this is what we need. This is where we're at. And so we ask for people to get involved. And again, this isn't to make people look bad. This isn't to make organizations look bad. You know, I have a lot of respect for ICR right now. I really do. You know, the president there, they invited the HPT guys to present to his people and his scientists. And yeah, and I know a president of a big organization that he wants more knowledge. He wants to find out more about the flood models, you know, and he wants to have a private discussion. Let's see the strengths and weaknesses of each side. And the CPT people will not step up to the microphone. And Walt Brown talks about that. People of this scientific revolution should observe who wants to step up to the microphone and have a debate. And again, I just debated somebody on the origin of Grand Canyon. That was a lot of fun, a paleontologist on it. And yeah, there's no way that little river cut that Grand Canyon. And you can see this. I got a YouTube channel called Solidify Your Faith. And the key to Grand Canyon is bulging and cracking 3 times. That's it. The water, yeah. But anyhow, I should let you guys go. If you're interested in that, check out that YouTube channel called Solidify Your Faith and search Grand Canyon. Or even Standing for Truth Ministries. That's where I debated the guy. He lines up all these theories, all these debates, standing for truth. And there was one time we were trying to set up a roundtable discussion between HPT people and CPT people, and they wouldn't step up to the microphone. So we did a hydroplate seminar instead. And so that's where we're at. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Round 5 is coming. There's a whole bunch more coming down the pike. We're going to take a break for tonight. We'll come back tomorrow maybe, and we'll keep plugging along, and we'll just put everything out in the open so you can see what's happened in the past, and you can come to your own conclusion, and hopefully the truth will prevail. So thanks again for tuning in. Have a blessed night, and may God guide your steps.